welcome to another episode of Coaches Connected. Today we're going to talk a little bit more around the topic of my last video, which was multiplicity, a topic and a value that I value greatly. Um, and we're going to talk about using multiplicity to get the most out of your roster. As you know about for us in the UK, a lot of factors go into our rosters each year and into our playbooks and into how we attack things. So there's always elements that might surprise us, and there's always elements that come up that we're not really expecting, and the continuity is not always there. So we, I like the idea of multiplicity to help me balance out any wrinkles that come in, any problems that come in. I always find that these things help. So we're going to go through not so much film today, because if you want to go back and check the last couple of videos that I've done, I've got a film of us running multiple stuff, multiple angles, multiple offensive formations with the same players and stuff. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, but just more of a draw it up and look at it rather than just show you the film. I'll talk about some of the pitfalls and things that you might be able to take with you and help you on your way. And if anybody can take a nugget off it, it's a job well done. Okay. So as you can see on our first screen, I'll just run through it and give the bullet points, and we'll talk about it a little bit. Formations, personnel, and adapting to it. First thing that I always say is that you've got your core players, your core playbook, sorry, and that core playbook is yours no matter what. It's what you hang your hat on. It's your bread and butter. That ain't never going to change. It is what it is. But is your playbook adaptive enough to fit the perils and the trajectories of different things each and every single year? For example, one year you may have a stud QB, the next year you may have no QB. You know, can your playbook withstand that drop off from year one to year two, and so on and so forth? It's like how many wide receivers do you have that year? How many running backs do you have that year? How many tight ends or whatever you want to have in your particular style of offense? If you haven't got those Joes, how do you get around that? How can you make the playbook still work to your advantage? This is where I believe using multiple formations and multiple motions and multiple things gets you a way around things and gets you a way of making things happen. My next point there is every year your roster will differ. Can you get your playmakers the ball? So that for me would be a case of when you get to preseason or you're coming back, you've got to look at your roster who you know like almost certainly is coming back that year. Know what is your best guys, and then you've got to figure a way of getting them the ball. Let's say your QB is taking a year out of the game, or he's got a new job, he's moved to another part of the country. How do you still get your stud wide receiver the football if you can't throw? You have to find ways to get the ball, whether it be moving him into the backfield, whether it be moving, throwing screens to him, all kinds of different stuff. So we have to look at the ways of getting our players and our stars the football when things come up. Uh, the next point there is formations are cheap install, which I believe formations can be a cheap install. And for me, formations give defenses a lot to think about. So if you're just going in 2x2 all the time, I always feel that defense can get more exotic with that. When you show them more looks, it makes them think, it makes them have to work a little bit harder, especially if you're like a no huddle team or an up tempo team, and you can switch from a two back to a four wide to a five wide, etc., in the blink of an eye, and it gives those defenses something to think about in a split second. If you're no huddle and you're coming out in two back and then you're in four wide or you're in trips, those things can really mess with defenses, especially at our level. It's a great equalizer because every defense, whenever they're in a bind, they go to pressure. It always has been and always will be, especially in this country. It's like if they're in a bind, blitz. So if you can hit them on their back foot, for me, it's always a great equalizer. Um, You can see there it says misdirection and multiple looks can give defensive headaches, which I've just talked about a little bit there. With misdirection, it's great to do. You can, whether you do it in the backfield or you bring a guy in motion, and then you can add to that by adding layers upon layers. So let's say if you're running a jet sweep, you can add in an inside zone off of that. You can add in a QB power in off of that. You can add in a fake jet and throw a screen, throw a slant, all kinds of things. It's mixing it up with the motions and the formations and the misdirections. You can build layers upon layers upon layers, and it's very very cheap in store and very very cheap to do. In terms of how you would do it, is it literally would just take 10 or 15 minutes of your time, one practice, focus on it, and then bring it into the game plan, for that practice plan for that week. You know, utilize it and get it in and get the reps in. Formations are pretty much a simple thing for us to teach. It's not that hard, especially when the majority is only moving one guy or two guys maximum. My next point there is do not let your playbook dictate what you can and cannot do. If your playbook is built around limiting yourself to one thing and you do not have that guy to run it, it's very, very tough for you to move football. Now your core is your core, and if you've got 5 or 6 players and you're going to run no matter what the person that you have, that's stuff you hang your hat on. You will have to find a way to make it work, but you have to be flexible enough to withstand the harshness and the reality of British American football, which could be players going on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Obviously, injuries, work. Players going through work, so you have to be adaptable enough to make all this stuff work. And that's for me. That if you're tunnel vision on one thing and one thing only, unless you're stacked, then there's always going to be stumbling blocks. And for me, we have to find answers to those stumbling blocks. And the next point there is do not be afraid to move guys around to ensure they get touches. And one of the things that we did in 19 was that we had a receiver move to QB, which meant that our stud receiver at times didn't get enough touches, so we had to find ways to get in the football. And that could be bringing the guy in motion, usually on a jet sweep or an orbit motion. It could have been getting him in the backfield, taking handoffs. It could have been different formations to get him close to the ball, so it's an easier throw for the quarterback. And it could be even, sticking him in a QB and letting him run the football. All kinds of options that you can do that you build off your base plays. If you run power, or you run outside zone or wide zone or counter, if you'd run that concept, and you can run that concept from a million different looks, your teaching will not change. It's only going to be 1 or 2 people who have to change and learn. And usually those guys are the ones that are your star players and they're switched on, and they can pick it up pretty quickly and move forward. Next point there is, can you adapt to the players? Can you adapt your players to the roles that you want? So if you come into pre-season and you're historically a 4-wide team or a 2-back team or whatever, and you haven't got those people, you have to try back and work. So if you see that you've got if you're a 4-wide team, but you happen to have 3 running backs and 2 bigger bodies who think they're tight ends, but they can't really catch or they can't really move at all, then make them into fullbacks. Make them use their girth better. So you've got to be able to adapt to think, well, you know what? I know that in my playbook I've got formation for a sniffer back or 2 fullbacks, or I form. I could really use these guys to make so they get playing time, they enjoy the game, and I can actually use them rather than just sitting on the sideline while my 1 or 2 guys fight for yards every single time. You have to find ways of getting all your guys to touch as they can, and for me that's a great equaliser in terms of getting guys in, because we can't pick and choose who we get most of the time in this country. It's a case of who turns up, how can we utilise them, And they may have dreams of being a wide receiver. They may have dreams of being a quarterback or whatever. And you can satisfy them for a short time, but at some point you have to talk to them and say, you know what, I think you're better suited to this and this and this. I think you'd be more beneficial to the team. I think you'd enjoy it more if they try it and they do like it. Then that works well for them. And all of a sudden you've got 4 running backs, 5 running backs, and that gives you more options in terms of what you can do and what you can show. Now, if you've only got 1 running back and you've got 4 or 5 wide receivers, then you have to make that work too. So you can't really be going into power sets when you've got 3 skinny wide receivers. You need to make those work, and then you utilize the trips and the 5 wide to make whatever works best for you at that point. Every single year is different. Every single roster is different. Every single season is going to be different, and you have to be able to adapt what you do when you do it. Okay. Now, last point and my final point on this PowerPoint is something I'm always big on, and that is simplicity is key. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to be able to do a lot of things or make it look like we're doing a lot of things, but in reality, it's very, very simple, and only one guy is moving, or at most 2 guys are moving, and it makes it look like we spent a whole heap of time doing it when it's just one move on the chessboard. And the reality is it's taking us 5 minutes to learn this formation, and maybe 15, 20 snaps to get us into the groove of running it and making it happen. You know what I mean? Exactly. That's the case of putting that on. A lot of teams don't go on the centre. A lot of teams are afraid to get their QBs in or just prefer to shop and snap it. I always say, even if you're not going to put it into your game plan, when your QB's doing pre 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 practice warm ups, just get to the centre and just take 10, 15 snaps per week under centre. Just get used to that handoff. Because if you want that QB sneak or you want to put that QB sneak in at some point, you need that yard. You think, well, I can just sneak this if I've got it in. You don't want to be at a point in time where you go, I could sneak it, but I can't sneak it. You've never repped it. One of my all-time things is if we don't rep it, we don't run it. I stand by that mantra, and it's cost me at times. But if I'm not going to go out there and run, play, even though I know we can run it, that we've never ran. Because if we fail, it's on me and not on the kids, not on the guys. I haven't put them in the position to win, so I want to make sure that we practice it over and over again. Now I'll get into the huddle in a minute. This is just a slide from previous talk I did about stick, but it's just 4 examples of us using what we have and making the same thing work in 4 or 5 different ways. Now you can see on this slide here that we are literally just running stick. Okay, the concept does not change, but because we've got 4 looks there, or it would be more. It would be more if we were in under center and I form and etc. etc. We could probably have 8, 9, 10 looks off of this if we were using our sniffing formation. We could have maybe 9, 10 looks off of this play, but we're still running the same play. And that for me is the beauty of multiplicity. So if you look at the photos or the drawings of the playbook, you can see that for the most part, the right side of the screen on each diagram is exactly the same. The reads for the QBs is still the same. There's not much difference. Okay? The only difference really is our H. Now, for me, as a running back coach, I take extreme importance in making sure that I take ownership if I'm going to do something like this. If I want to be multiple, and it's my guys that are going to be responsible for doing all the different motions and all the different jobs that they have to do in terms for this to work. So if we're running our two back king and green, they know that they know if they're sealing, they know if they're leading, they know if they're crossing. All these things have to be taken care of, and we do this on Huddle and on Zoom now, look on stuff, pre stuff, and then we go through this, and we may spend 20 minutes per practice just running through our formations at running back in our after our return, or whatever we're going to do, and we make sure we get it done. I take ownership of that so that the guys do not fail, because if they fail, it's my fault because I've not put them in the position to get it right. That's how I've always looked at it. If it was the receivers who were going to doing it, the same would apply to coaching receivers. Okay, so you can see on this clip here, it's mainly the height. It's mainly the height in every single photo that does something different. Okay. In terms of our trips version, then our receivers know that when we're teaching, if it was a height receiver, he knows that when we go on the trips, what his joke's going to be because we teach it when we install our trips package on that week. Okay. I'll switch screen now and I'll move into the puzzle. We'll just draw some stuff. Okay. We are literally in gun right now. Okay. Now, it doesn't really matter where your back is, but if it was my offense right now, this would be how it would look up right now. We would have our X and our Y on the line, our H and our Z off of it, and our R in the backfield. Okay. Now, how can we make the most of our bodies and our looks? Now, a simple way to make another thing is by moving our H. And if this means bringing our H receiver out and bringing the H back in, then we feel we can do that with ease. It may slow down the process a little bit in terms of if we had no huddle, we have to make that personnel change. But we're happy to do so because we can then give 3 or 4 more looks off of 2 back that we couldn't give off of 4 wide. So we'll start with 2 back. We'll talk about the looks that we can give, and we would install these all in one weekend. Obviously, we're pre-talking through with our running back room on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, and then when we got to Sunday, we would go to the store. We'd have video clips of us running it, all lined up in this stuff from years gone by. So they don't come in raw, uncut, eyes wide. They got a grasp of what's going on. Okay, so the most simplest thing for us is to move our H, and then the X, the Y, and the Z. Nothing else changes for them. That's their rules. They stay as they are. So if we was to switch out our H and we went 2 back, and we shape 2 back, and our H back comes in, simplest thing to do in the world. Put him pro. And when we're pro good, that opens up a lot of alleys for us because we can then do things with our pro across the backs. We can do things like lead. If we run an outside zone, we can get a lead block on outside zone. Lots of options you can do just by moving one back. So for the line, for the receivers, if we was to call outside zone on this play, nothing would change. All we would do is have our H come in, and he'd go ahead and block the first non-coloured jersey we sent. It's not a difficult install. It's cheap. It's easy. It's convenient. Okay. Now, if it was a pass play, and let's say we were installing our stick concept. We know on stick that our running back runs a swing. Okay. So we may just ask our running back to mimic it, depending on how we feel. The simplest it doesn't much say just mimic it and run a swing. Okay. You're still going to keep that linebacker entertained. This is what we want. You could run an arrow. You could have him stay home. You could have both backs stay home if you felt like it. But we try and keep the rules as minimal as possible. So on this thing we might just go arrow, because we know that when we go into our next formation, that will come across into the next thing. So we might go default arrow when we're in pro. Okay. Another option is just by moving it forward. Okay. Moving it down. And then we're in at more of our pistol look. We call this queen. It is literally queen because our H is on the left hand side. If it was king, you will be on the right hand side. It's no earth shattering reason why. That's just the way that it was taught to me. That's why I'm carrying on using it. But as you can see now, as we've already described once, We could have still run inside zone. We could have this guy sitting on the edge. We could have this guy running the zone. We could have this guy leading. So, if we're running outside zone, the same thing that we just did in pro would apply here. So we're just running outside zone. So we've only moved our H to 2 spots, and that's another look. And then if we're still running stick from this, nothing changes for this half of the screen. Nothing changes. It changes for our X, for our Y, for our Z, for our line, for our quarterback, for our R. The only person that's taking this on is our H. And I know that I'm going to make sure that it works because I'm investing my time to make sure that it works. It's on us as coaches to make sure they get it. Again, we could move them across. That's very keen for us. That's now 4 or 5 formations. 4 formations. But all we've done is moved our H into 3 positions, and that we've moved our R behind. Okay, you can see how we can install this and teach this in one weekend because it's not that difficult to do. But again, it's more numbers in the box for the defense to count. They're going to put more numbers in rather than when they're spread out wide. Creates more space, creates lanes. Okay, you can also do the same thing that we just did. And now you can have it the cross tracking on the zone play still blocking. You can still run out as zone right. Still run out zone right. Same things as we've just done. We can still run outside zone to the right. Still without blocking, no problem. Okay, and these are the simple things we do. Okay, if we were still to be running our stick, you could just get out how you cut a flash across. Still run the arrow if you wanted to. If that's how you want to keep it in keep your uniform, and then the right side of the concept is exactly the same. So I'm just using stick as one example because stick for me is one of my 4-6, and that's important to me. So stick will be our first play installed, and I know that we can run stick from now 6 formations. If I move my H to here, okay, it's now in a sniffer mode, which is very popular at the moment. Again, the variation things you can come across, you can block there. We can still run our inside zone or our outside zone from this. It could just be an outside backer. It's not a problem. Outside backer. It's not a problem. We could run away from the sniffer, and just use him as extra blocker. We can do all kinds of stuff. You could have sniffer left, sniffer right. It depends on whatever you choose to do. There's lots of things to do to run. The only difference for me here would be if we did run stick in this situation, I would just switch things around and I would have my H run the arrow this way. And I'll have my Y run swing this way. Just so that we've got something keeping this occupied, keeping it there off the backside of the stick. Still getting our 3 levels on our stick concept to the right. Lots of ways to skin a cat. And that's just by moving our H. Now, of course, we know other ways of doing this is if you have got more of a veteran presence, you know full well that we can move our R around, we can move our R into trips in an empty backfield, we can move our R into the other side. Again, I'll show clips on this of what we've done with our R, and we just basically had to run a bubble because we didn't want to give too much teaching. So if we passed them football, he'd run a bubble. So our pass concept was not effective. If this was 4 verts or if this was stick, it was still stick. He would just run a bubble. We're not asking him to do anything. So his rule was, if we're passing, you're running the bubble. That was it. And then from there, you could obviously add in um, motions and plays off of motions if you don't want to. So let's say we were an empty, that forces the defense out wide. They have to respect that width. They force it out. We can then just bring our arm in motion because it's off the line, handing the ball. Okay. Now, if you want to be really really simplistic about it and not hand the ball and not worry about handing the ball off, one of the things that we did at the very start is that we pop past it. So and then all you have to do is tell the refs at the very start of the game, when we jet it, our QB's going to pop past it, and that way it falls incomplete, and you don't get a drop, you don't get a fumble because that the refs at that level, they do make mistakes. There is no instant replay. If they see a drop ball, they will think it's a fumble. Okay, if you tell the refs pre-game that it's a pop pass, that QB gets 3 yards, and if it's incomplete, if it's dropped, it's incomplete, and you don't have to worry about losing the football. Okay, so if you're just doing it quickly, a pop pass works a treat. Okay, so if you want to build from that, let's say if you're running that jet and you wanted to run QB power off of it, you could. You can still run QB power off of it from behind it. If you've got power in your arsenal, you're running power from one back or whatever. All those things still apply in a different formation. Now you can switch it up. You can still run the jet, but instead of it being an R, it could be the H. Another look you've got. Still run QB power off of that. Okay? And that would apply left or right. That would apply left or right. Okay? Lots of things you can do just by throwing a guy somewhere else. And of course, if you were having a running back empty, you can put him this side and run the jet. You can bubble, you can bunch him, you can do all kinds of different things to make that motion work. Of course, if you wanted to build from that again, you could keep the R in the backfield, like so. And let's just say that you do run the jet play a lot. You can still jet your Z. You can still run your QB power if you choose to, or counter. Whatever you want to do. Okay. Even if you wanted to even if you wanted to run QB power instead of QB power, you wanted to run running back power. It's still available off of that. You still run your running back power, your zone, your outside zone, whatever you want to do. You can add another layer on top of that. So if you're running the Z jet, you could have your R. Just run a motion on the snap, take anybody away. It's still run your QB power. It's still run your QB power left or right. There's lots of things you can do that's simple and effective. Now, if you don't have a QB and you are literally putting your best athlete at QB, those QB runs are going to be vital for you making those important yards when you need them, especially when you can't throw the football very far. So you want to give them quick, easy hitches, quick, easy outs, not too far, and build your process up. And if you build your layers up with uh, motions and jets and plays off of jets, it really does help you in a big way. Of course, you can also run the slow screen. If you get across to the left, you slow screen to the right. There's lots of things that you can do that can aid your offensive system, so that you're actually putting in too much of an effort of a work. If you've already installed your jet play on that one week, That jet plane carries across, interview multiple formations. You'll probably spend one 10-minute session, 15-minute session, going through how it affects different things. You might have, if you were still wanting to run your jet from two back, let's say we were in pro, and you still wanted to run the jet from two back, you could do that. You know, this is stuff that we have done. You can still run your jet from pro. We just have our house lead. He would then lead before the snap of the football. So you'd have to get the snap of the football spot on, snap it there. So you got a house lead off of it. You can fake that, fake the lead, and run a slant screen to the right, or run a QB power to the right, or whatever you want to do, or off back toss, or run back toss, whatever you want to do. There's lots of options you can do, lots of options you can make off of it. It's all about building layers with what you have. If you've got four receivers and five running backs, utilize the running backs. If you've got one running back and five receivers, then utilize what you have. You have to make the most of the person you have, and that changes yearly, and sometimes in seasonally. If you get a rash of injuries and you've got one running back, that's going to affect how you approach again. You can't possibly do two running back formations, three running back formations, and you have one back. And that affects what you do. That will affect your passing game. You have to be smart with it. You can still run QB power with it, because you can split out and backfield, do all kinds of stuff. You have to make the best of what you've got, and you have to think of ways to get the best out of the roster that you have. Okay. I hope, guys, with some input that you can take away from me. I always appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and listen, and I thank you very much. I'll speak to you again soon. Take care.